Welcome to Shakti Punch, Mithronis. I'm your host, Pranav. On this show, we go together hand in hand on a cosmic voyage to unravel the mysteries of reality through a dharmic, Indic perspective. We're doing dharmic futurism here. We're talking divinity, reality, praxis, the whole shebang. Time on the clock, 426,875 years, 89 days, 22 minutes, 48 seconds on the clock.
Time is a construct.
Exactly. But, you know, get all your shopping done anyway. Black Friday is upon us. Let's get into it. How you doing, Adi?
Doing good.
Good. We're slowly approaching the end of the Yoga Vasistha. This is the penultimate episode of our series on the Yoga Vasistha, after which we will be taking a break and returning with a new text. Right now we're aiming at the Yoga Sutras, and we're going to be switching things up, and we're going to be doing a lot of interviews and a lot of other things. We're going to be mixing things up. We don't want to get stale by staying in the same format. Am I right, Adi? And, you know, I've got the Hindu Orson Welles here as well behind the camera, so we can't just be doing it, you know, it can't be the same old here, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think we gotta find a new background.
Yeah.
These trips up to space
I know.
you know,
outer space is getting boring.
For that.
The void is getting boring, you know? Akash is getting boring. Anyway, I want to get into some topics really quick. So, in the news lately, the Islamists of Bangladesh are now threatening ISKCON. ISKCON being the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. They're demanding a ban of ISKCON in Bangladesh. And all I can really say to the Islamists trying to ban ISKCON is good luck, Islamists. Okay? You want to know about jihad? These guys are the kings of fucking jihad, actually. But a whole different kind of jihad. ISKCON, I'm sorry, you cannot withstand the power of ISKCON. I'm sorry, guys. These are the Mormons of Hinduism. Okay? These are the Indic Mormons. All right? They are not to be fucked with. So really, best of luck to you. Okay? Because, I mean, really, guys, you know, first of all, it's really, however you feel about ISKCON, and there's a lot to critique and so on and so forth about ISKCON, right? Yeah. So this isn't me dick riding ISKCON too hard, you know what I mean? But I do admire ISKCON. They are one of the most badass Hindu organizations to have emerged in modernity. And they follow their moves, Playboy. Follow their moves. You know what I mean? If everyone's hears about reinforcing the Dharma and fighting off the enemies and this and that, ISKCON is the way. You got to follow their moves, okay? They really are the Mormons of Hinduism. And they are a badass organization. First of all, Prabhupada, the founder of ISKCON, here's how badass this guy is, okay? He came to the United States in 1965. You know how old he was? 69 years old. This guy took a boat trip, okay? He took a boat trip. He had $7, okay? I think 200 or 300 books that he brought with him. And he had 2 heart attacks on the way here. Okay? That's how badass this guy is. Oh, wow. He came to ISKCON, and founded what has now become a global empire of Dharma. Okay? Now, granted, it's a bit too kind of monotheistic for my tastes, right? And the way that they behold themselves. Yeah. But again, this isn't about shitting on ISKCON. This is about talking about ISKCON a little bit. ISKCON had a very early win that I want to talk about, which was about 50 years ago in New York City, which is where they started. And they were planning their first Rath Yatra in New York City, right? Their first kind of parade, we'll call it, right? And they had tons of challenges. This is New York City. They're a weird Indic cult that's kind of come in. Nobody knows who they are. And so they got a grant of the parade permit, right? But they needed a place to set up. They needed a place to set up their whole float and their whole procession, right? They need to get everything ready. You know, they needed to build chariots and stuff like that. And they were looking for places to do this. And every person possible, they're knocking on doors for people, rail yards, stuff like that. People are like, no, we're not going to help you. So lo and behold, they knocked at the door of every person possible in vain, except for one man. And that was Donald Trump.
Wow.
Donald Trump, who apparently never granted anybody any of these kinds of favors, didn't even meet with them directly, just saw their paperwork and was like, all right, why not? It's like, why not? Why not? You know, the supreme personality of Godhead coming through. And very interesting to me. Donald Trump did that. Now, interesting fact about Prabhupada. Before he came to New York, he had actually moved to a small town outside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, where he had started Actually, this is the only Indian family that he knew in the America, a family known as the Agarwals, in a small town outside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. That's where he had actually started his preaching before he decided to move to New York and really set up shop. That town was Butler, Pennsylvania.
Tell us more.
Butler, Pennsylvania, the same place where shitty Donald Trump almost got assassinated, and narrowly by a mere hair, a mere Krishna's hair, averted getting headshotted, splatted, and assassinated.
And a civil war breaking
And
out.
a civil war possibly breaking out. That is some strange karma between Donald Trump and Sri Krishna and ISKCON. Okay. Is Trump a Hare Krishna? I don't know. He's definitely saffron. You know what I'm saying? He's an orange man. All right. He's kind of Hindu based on that. And another interesting thing about Donald Trump, he'll once in a while, and listen, guys, this isn't a political thing. I'm not supporting Donald Trump. We're having fun here. Just chill. Take a deep breath. Okay. Every once in a while, Donald Trump will pop some dharmic shit out of his mouth.
Like what?
So I saw an interview with him, right? It was in a magazine. And they were like, hey, are you worried about all these prosecutions coming at you? This is before he won the election and all that. Here's a direct quote from Donald Trump. He says, no, not really. He says, listen, if you care too much, you tend to choke. And in a way, I don't care. It's just, life is life.
Wow.
That's a man to me who's read the Bhagavad Gita in some way, shape, or form. Or
Shri Donald Trump?
the Shri, or he's seen The Legend of Bagger Vance per what you had said, Adi.
He does like golf, man.
Yeah, he loves
does like
golf. So he might have actually seen that.
For those of you who don't know, Legend of Bagger Vance is the Bhagavad Gita on an 18-hole.
Exactly. And an 18-hole. Perfect. 18 chapters.
Oh, my God.
18 holes.
Oh, my God. Golf is a dharmic sport.
Golf
Episode
is a dharmic-
18. Okay, but this is crazy. So
Yeah.
Donald Trump and Krishna and ISKCON are intertwined.
They are karmically intertwined, okay? There is a connection between them. He saved them about 48, 50 years ago, helping them set up their parade, really launch, kind of in a way, instrumental in launching the global Krishna consciousness movement. I'm perhaps unawares to him, unwittingly. Maybe he's been a crypto Hare Krishna this whole time, though. You know what I mean? He just keeps under lock. Are you just reading The Art of the Deal? No, it's,
His kids are half Russian. There's a lot of Hare Krishnas in the Eastern Europe and Russian area.
So who knows? But I mean, Prabhupada started in Butler. Donald Trump's life was saved in Butler, PA. I don't know, guys. I don't know. I'm just connecting some dots here. I'm not trying to go all Alex Jones on you. Although Alex Jones himself, I believe, is a tantric rishi in his own right, but we'll get into that another time.
Butler, PA is like the new Madurai.
Dude, it really is. Dude, it's not too far from Monroeville, which is where the first Shri Venkateshwar temple was established. That's the first Tirupati Balaji temple that was established in the United States, maybe the Western Hemisphere. Lot of connections. I thought that was fascinating. The dots connected for me. But, just coming back around to it, all the Islamists in Bangladesh who were trying to ban the Hare Krishnas, I really think you need to take a step back here, okay? This is a numbers game where you can't see what's actually happening. You have no idea. The shitstorm, the shit tornado, the shit cyclone since Bangladesh that is going to befall you if you really try to do this.
And the mitosis that is ISKCON.
Please explain.
It like one starts
replicating?
and it expands, and another is birth and it.
Dude, they're a highly impressive organization. And say what we want about corporatized Hinduism and all that, but the fact is that Dharma is now going to have to, as we start to compete in modernity with more corporatized religions, right? Islam, Judaism, Christianity, particularly Islam and Christianity, right? We're very into proselytization and stuff like that. It is a marketplace now, and ISKCON is really doing their thing. Shouts to BAPS, Swaminarayan Temple, also doing their thing. And again, you can have issues with each of these sects, each of these sampradayas as you like, whatever. But listen, we all know Hinduism is a big tent. You know what I mean?
They are the expansionist organizations, like it or not.
They
They're
really
the ones that are doing it.
Never once are they playing defense. You know what I mean? They're always on the offensive. Peaceful though, you know what I mean? Yeah. Listen, it's wild going into Union Square and seeing some white dudes who have the, I forget what you call it, the hair.
A pilika. Maybe in South India we call it a pilika. Maybe it's a pillock.
Yeah. White guys with that, dressed up all in orange. They've
Mispronouncing the Bhagavad Gita.
I know, but they're all walking around with their little tote bags. They've got another bag. I don't know if you know this, that they keep their hands in where they're doing their malas all the time.
Wow, I didn't know that. Oh, that makes sense, yeah.
Yeah. Hare Krishnas. Also, they started their own music movement as well, Krishna Core.
They
Did you know
peaked with Krishna
Shelter?
Core? No, I was going to say they peaked with George Harrison.
Like, I really think they are the Mormons of Hinduism.
That is such a crazy take, though.
They really are, dude.
Because if you think about how people probably saw the Mormons when the Mormons were like first expanding into the Western region of America, like very different than how we see them today.
Yeah, Prabhupada is a kind of Joseph Smith type too, right?
In 150 years, who says that these won't actually be the...
Look at how far they've gotten in 50 years.
I know.
You know what I mean?
Insane.
And the thing is, they kind of float under the radar, as ostentatious as they are, right? As inconspicuous as they are, like they're kind of floating under the radar. Because you know why? Because they're also not like... Their teachings are very benign, right? In terms of just Krishna consciousness and all that, and the philosophy behind it. It's very appealing. You know what I mean? Again, I'm not like fully on board with. I'm myself a Hare Krishna, although I do respect them. I do respect you guys.
We love you,
dude. Listen, I was walking around in downtown Brooklyn a few months ago. Gigantic church, huge church. Closed down. You know what was on front? It was a big banner, Society for Krishna Consciousness.
That is crazy. When we start taking the churches... Oh, maybe I shouldn't say that. Well, that might start us a war.
Say it, dude. Say it. When they start taking the churches.
That. You know, I've been going, wow, Vivek Ramaswamy, wow, Kamala Harris, these Indians are on the political stage. No, when ISKCON takes a church, when ISKCON takes a European cathedral, that will be the end.
It's happening. It's happening. They're going to rehabilitate the Notre Dame in France.
It was them. It was just a bunch of Gujarati uncles actually donating money to... You know, one thing I was thinking of, though, and this is like, this is kind of the standard for all temples and beliefs across, like, you know, dharmic religions in India. But I think seva, like literally feeding people after they go to the temple, is a huge reason that people come. And then I think that has a huge thing because, like, you know, I've been privileged to live in a few different places. You always see students at Krishna kitchens.
100%.
There's always a ton of students at Krishna kitchens. And then, you know, the basic dharmic philosophy is very attractive to anyone, really.
Intelligent people do tend to gravitate towards it because there is a heady philosophical underpinning to it, right? As we've discussed, it's not just like, I say this and I said this, such and such a person said this, and thus it is, and thus it shall be, right? Mm-hmm. It's like, you know, nyaya, logic, right? All that stuff is a huge part of what we're doing here. Like when we're reading Yoga Vasistha, all this stuff is actually really intense metaphysical philosophy, right? Because we're talking about subject-object dissolution. Like you're really getting down to the building blocks of reality when you're talking about this stuff. So Hinduism is very appealing to the rational mind, right? That's why there's a whole crop of what I call Hindus. You know?
A lot of couples that are Hindus.
Jews are really into Hinduism, you know what I mean? And a lot of like newer, more contemporary Hindu pundits actually come from Jewish backgrounds, you know? And because I think Judaism also has a very specific, intense philosophical fire that rages within them. You know what I mean?
There's a similar compartmentalization, I think, between American Jews and Hindus in general, but probably American Hindus is like kind of the compartmentalization of like religion and then like, you know, even STEM based work.
Right.
Like a lot of other religions, like you can't be a geologist and think the world is 6,000 years old.
Yeah.
But I think there's a similar kinship to that, you know, like a lot of Jewish people follow their traditions and stuff, but they're not, you know,
they're flexible.
They're
flexible.
They're flexible.
It's
not going to come in the way of like, you know.
Yeah. Not as flexible as Hindus, I will say, because the thing is, that's the other thing is, again, you read Yoga Vasistha.
We are the most flexible.
You read Yoga Vasistha, they're building on ideas that popped up 1,000, 1,500 years before this, right? Even more so. And they're constantly developing it. They're developing it. And that's the great thing about Dharma. And this is why you can never jump too hard on the trad train, even though the trads are very important. Dharmic futurism. That's what it's all about here, baby. ISKCON is a dharmic futurist organization, like it or not.
They are.
So let's get into it. I observed something really interesting in the Yoga Vasistha. As I'm reading the Yoga Vasistha, I didn't know anything really about it going into it. My thoughts about it were, this is like an Advaita. This is going to like the seminal text of Advaita Vedanta, right? And then because it's centered around Lord Rama as the central sort of protagonist or acolyte in it, and Vasistha, and it's rooted in the telling of the Ramayana, that this is going to be a sort of Vaishnava text, right? Not so though, because now we're getting hit with a lot of Shaivite and even Tantric elements in this book, and we're going to touch upon it briefly today. And I was thinking about why is this? And it's because, Yoga Vasistha was composed in Kashmir and was composed in Kashmir coeval to a lot of other dharmic movements that were popping up, Trikashaivism, Tantra, Buddhism, things like that, right? But this philosophy had already been around for 1,500 years or so. So, but again, they were interacting. There was a lot of intermingling and a lot of dialogue happening between multiple faiths. And as I noted, I think on a previous episode, Yoga Vasistha is actually kind of a sort of compendium of Hindu thought up until that point at which it was composed, right?
Both Puranic and like the philosophical.
100%. Yes, exactly. Darshanas, Puranas, all that stuff, right? And so I came across, all of a sudden out of nowhere, because we've been talking about Brahman, the supreme consciousness. And here towards the end of the Yoga Vasistha, and in a story called The World Within the Rock, and we're not going to talk about that because you already know what it's going to be. It's like, once upon a time, there was a famous apple, there was a famous rock, or whatever, but...
And we were one with the apple.
Yes. So what happens in this is, at one point, Vasistha is describing what he sees through his divine vision, the dissolution of the worlds, the end of a yuga, essentially, right? And all the worlds are kind of collapsing, and the suns are burning out, and all the worlds, various worlds are dissolving, and so on and so forth. The gods are all retreating back into Brahman, right? And then he sees out into the darkness, he sees basically almost silhouetted form of this being. And this being is, it gives the whole description, 5 heads, 10 arms, It's dancing, though, doing a dance. And that is Rudra, right? That is Rudra, also known as Lord Shiva, right? And the Lord of death, or of dissolution, I guess you could say, right? Destruction. And that's what's happening, right? And he's dancing, and he's like, whoa, what is this form that is this? And he says, I understand, this is Rudra, right? But then another form emerges from Rudra that he sees kind of behind him. He says, what is this shadow? There's no sun anywhere. How could there be a shadow? And no, who is the shadow? It's Kali, right? And then he goes into a huge description of Kali, and we can go into it. She's known as Durga. She's known as Parajita. She's known as this. She's known as that. She's known as Jaya, giving the whole descriptions of Kali. And basically what we're getting around to here is, because this is a non-dualistic text, right? I'm thinking this is going to be pure monism, but no, we're not coming around to the concept, and we've discussed this before, of Purusha and Prakriti, right? But now we're getting into the Tantric stuff, because this is really about Shiva Shakti, right? Because now Vasistha starts to describe what is the ultimate consciousness, Shiva. That is the ultimate consciousness. And Kali is the dynamic form of that. Right. And so what I want to do now is unpack a little bit the central image that we know of Kali, that we all see, right? Got garland of skulls, holding up some guy's head. There's a blood bowl beneath it, and a scythe, and all this other stuff. Fangs, the blood dripping, and all that. But then also, strangely, she's standing on the body of Lord Shiva. Mm-hmm. Now, why is that? Very compelling explanation for that. And I'd heard sort of intimations of this in previous places. And I know some of you out here are much smarter than me, so I encourage you to chime in as well. But this is what I'm getting out of the Yoga Vasistha. Venkatesananda's Yoga Vasistha as well. Remember, I'm just a shishya. I'm not a guru. I'm not an expert. I'm a student like you, and we're learning together. So what Vasistha says is, Kalaratri, which is Kali, right, is to the Lord what movement is to the air. Just as an empty space, air moves as if it has form, she moves in the infinite consciousness, executing the will or the wish of the Lord, as it were. When there is no such movement of the energy, then the Lord alone exists. While she continues to dance in this fashion in space, then by accidental coincidence, she comes into contact with the Lord. The moment this contact is made, she is weakened and made thin and transparent. She abandons her cosmic form, becomes a mountain, becomes a small town, then a beautiful tree, then she becomes like space, and lastly, she merges with the form of Lord Shiva himself. right? Like a river entering the ocean, the Lord then shines as one without a second. And this is really what that image of Kali is about. Kali is the reality that we are experiencing, nature, the materiality of existence. We might describe it as Maya, right? We might describe it as Prakriti, but we are now going to describe it as Shakti, the dynamic energy of consciousness, and that is what Kali is, right? And is it dualistic? Yes, in a sense, but it's really just describing a process more than it is a concrete reality, a concrete separation of two things. Yeah. Ma Kali is the dynamic representation of Lord Shiva. Lord Shiva is the ultimate consciousness in repose. That undergirds all reality as we know it. Ma Kali is the dynamic form of that, and I find it very fascinating that her image is one of such intense violence and chaos, right? Because to me, that suggests a very interesting interpretation of the world as we know it, which is that the world is chaotic. The world is full of suffering. It's full of violence. Now, of course, these are all the heads of demons that she's wearing, right? It's about slaying ignorance. And there's many different interpretations of this image of Kali as we know it. But I find it fascinating that the moment she steps on Lord Shiva is to signify the moment that Prakriti has merged with Purusha, that Shakti has merged with Shiva into the ultimate consciousness. And once that's happened, consciousness revels in duality till it sees its own self. This is from the Yoga Vasistha, right? The energy of consciousness dances until it beholds the glory of nirvana. When it beholds consciousness, it becomes pure consciousness. Thus, samsara has been crossed over, et cetera, right? To me, that was fascinating. I wanted to talk about it. Yeah. Any thoughts on this, Adi?
Yeah, I mean, the image will have already been up behind you, but I've just been thinking about the Raja Ravivarma depiction.
Yeah.
Of like, it's really striking the first time you see it. I didn't see it all that long ago, actually, to be honest, despite seeing 100 depictions of Shiva and Kali separately.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's very interesting to think about the fact that they represent her they represent time with such chaos, but that also leads to ideas of like free will, right? And like self-determination in many ways, which is like, I feel very in line with what we've been talking about, because if time wasn't chaotic, that would mean that there was some form of organization to it, which I don't know if organized chaos
maybe
is
stability though is really the thing, right?
Maybe I'm trying to find the right words here.
Yeah, stasis and stability, because that is it's described throughout the Yoga Vasistha. Brahman, or in this case Shivam, is described as the stabilizing form, the perfect substratum of consciousness that exists as the stable thing from which everything else kind of comes and manifests, right? Yeah. And so, yeah, I think you are right about that, because that is the order, right?
Yeah.
And then the world as we know it, in this case, as depicted by Shakti, by Prakriti, is a bit chaotic, right? And becomes subject to various laws of causation and this and that and the other thing.
I was going to say, it's all about these different separate reactions that influence something in a way that can't happen without some form of chaos.
The description of Kali is wild, and it's very similar it's not similar because it's not the same, but when Lord Krishna reveals his true divine form to Arjuna on the battlefield, and you're seeing, it's just the opulence of the absolute is how we know that chapter, right? The yoga of opulence or whatever. It's a very similar description. Let me see if I can pull it up really quickly.
I wonder did they ever talk about the Mahavidyas in this? Like, Chinnamashta?
Right, yes,
she's got a similar one, but she's standing on... with like her head severed and with other heads, but she's standing on Radha Krishna making love.
Ah, interesting.
Which is like,
Yeah, I didn't realize that's what she was standing on.
Yeah.
We don't get into the Mahavidyas in this, and I myself am not well versed enough in the Mahavidyas to discuss them fluently, but
it's just interesting. There's a parallel to also using dynamic forms of things to express these philosophies through
100%,
art, right? And story and deities.
Story and deities. And what's fascinating is Vasistha himself says, and then at another point, he basically is like, after contemplating this for some time, I suddenly realized that all of this creation was within myself, my own body, just the tree is in the seed, right? And so we're getting back around, and that's the final succession, right? The final phase of that succession in terms of sadhana or practice or self-inquiry, right? Is that you realize it's all this all-pervasive subjectivity, actually, right? But I find it fascinating because we talked a lot about metaphor, and the way Rudra has been conceived then is thus as the metaphor, right?
Exactly.
And that's what all these things sort of are. They're ways of encapsulating, and they're real, right? Especially for us, as far as we're concerned. especially as a Hindu. I'm not trying to be a Western academic here who's saying this is all just metaphor, but metaphor is real.
100%.
Metaphor is how we grasp reality, right? That is how we're able to grasp reality. Without metaphor, we're lost. We're in the mucky stew of something that is it's non-existence. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So that's essentially what Vasistha himself is saying, is that as he's perceiving this, he says, oh, this is all things that I'm actually projecting out in a way, right? All this creation was within myself, my own body. And I think that's also fascinating, right? These are intense metaphors, but you can never defy the power of the metaphor, right? Just because I'm describing it doesn't mean that I am over it, right? That I'm standing above it. I'm standing beneath it, right? Even my own jiva is a metaphor for something else, a metaphor for a douchebag. I don't know, you know what I mean? Maybe I shouldn't say D-bag, but
I think it's fine.
But to me, I found this very profound. I think that the dichotomy that you see between those two things, Ma Kali is also, that's the mother, you know what I mean? So it's just like, and she comes in various forms, the Mahavidyas, right? Sometimes you see her as just Durga, where she's there to rescue her devotees, right? Mm-hmm. Ma Kali is the form that you see when she hates ignorance, she hates evil, and that's why she is like that, right? It's her slaying things throughout the universe. She's destroying the universe, actually, right? Yes. She's destroying ignorance. Remember, we talked about before how the universe is a sacrifice made by time to consciousness. Very interesting. Exactly this. And that's this. Kali is not because she's dark. That's Kali, right? Kali is referential to time, right? Kala, Mahakala, right? That is time. And thus, we're kind of seeing it. And wow, the metaphor just really drove home for me here. Just now, thinking about it, talking about it with you.
Yeah. And bringing back that quote from a few episodes ago now, multiple episodes ago.
Yeah, because that's a hard one to unpack. You know what I mean? Yes. The universe, which is ignorance, is a sacrifice made by time to consciousness. And that's what the image of Kali is. Wow.
Kali and Shiva.
And Shiva. Yes, Shiva is the consciousness.
He's the consciousness.
Yes.
And her foot. It's interesting just to be an art historian about this even. How you perceive the foot in Indian culture is just vastly, or even East Asian cultures, but just so different than in the West. There's respect and knowledge attributed in feet. I've been told before, even in India, like when you walk into like her shrine, look at her feet first.
Of course.
Right? And that's like this respect and everything.
And even when you worship a guru, a lot of times you'll just have a picture of the guru's feet.
Picture of the guru's feet. When you see your parents, I mean, traditionally people touch their feet first, right?
We're feet touchers.
We're feet touchers. The OG. OG foot
Hello,
fetish.
Quentin Tarantino. Hello.
We're waiting. His 10th film is going to be a Hindu foot fetish fest. The Hindu foot fetish mala. I totally forgot what I was talking about.
Feet.
Feet. Yes. So her placing her foot on Shiva, it can seem like this conquering thing, which it is, but it is also this form of connection and claim. Yeah. Similar to...
well, it's her stepping back into the absolute consciousness, right?
Absolutely,
That's the merging of it. That could be one thing.
I think it's interesting, right? Anyways, just thinking if someone had depicted it with her hand on his chest versus her foot. Yeah. It's like stepping into it. It has a different connotation. It's interesting.
Sure does.
Yeah.
I think this is fascinating. Actually, I feel amazing because we just came to wrapped up a bow on something that we had talked about before. Yeah. Ignorance, the universe is a sacrifice made by time to consciousness. This is what it actually means. Unbelievable, fascinating, amazing, just an incredible book. Because at times it's a slog, but then sometimes it just gives you these gems that just fall on your head like this.
Yeah.
An incredible book. I'm proud of myself for wading through this whole thing too. Dude, this is not easy.
It was not easy. Are you by the index now? Is that what's...
No, there's still like 100 or so pages. We're gonna like speed run through it for the next episode.
No one's really citing anything in a scripture.
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
bibliography.
There's a huge index in here, obviously. But this is, I can't remember. This is a story within a story within a story as well. So. Highly referential. I think that's a good place to stop.
Amazing.
Yoga Vasistha, amazing book. Jai Ma Kali. This has been Shakti Punch, episode 16. Thank you guys for joining us. As usual, remember, we have a Patreon. Remember to like, share, subscribe, do all the other stuff. We love you guys. Thank you so much. Jai Ma Kali. Om Namah Shivaya.